What's the best new feature in Illustrator 2024? Hands down, it's text-to-vector graphic. It really is. You enter a text prompt, Illustrator asks Adobe Firefly to make a pixel-based image, and Illustrator automatically traces those Firefly pixels with vectors. Here is everything you need to know about this exceedingly powerful feature. All right, a few things right up front about this video that I want you to know, because you're a savvy YouTube consumer. You don't want to waste your time. So for starters here, I'm calling this text to vector, just kind of like on the side. You know, it's really called text to vector graphic. But that's just one more word that doesn't really help. And by the way, it should be called, in my opinion, text to vectors, because it's always making multiple path outlines invariably. That's what it's doing. So it's taking a text prompt, turning it into AI vectors out of thin air, which is totally great. And that goes to point number 2, which is, by the way, this is an enormous feature. It's been out for 2 weeks now, and you may have seen a couple of videos that are really short and just kind of show you what's going on right off the bat. But they don't do it service because there's a lot going on. And I've waited these 2 weeks so I could provide you with a meaty, comprehensive video that's going to tell you everything. This is just part 1, the introduction. And then finally, I really like this feature a lot. I think it ranks among the best first version features we've ever seen in Illustrator, up there with the pen tool. It's really amazing the degree to which it's just impeccably executed, I think, with some exceptions. So here's what you do. You go to the window menu. This is the pro way to work. Go to text to vector graphic, beta, whatever it's called, doesn't matter. It brings up this brilliant panel. It's a great panel. It's got so much going on. Okay, so some opening maneuvers. Like in chess, you know, start moving the pawns around. We go with subject right here. And so notice we got all these types. So scene, you can create an entire scene. You'll see icon pattern. We'll come to all of that in this video. Subject, that was where I'm going to start. Good place to start. And then it's like, well, you got some presets. So, you know, you can enter your own prompt, by the way. But I'm going to start with this preset, Big Juicy Burger Branding. And I'll just click on it. Now, I want you to see it's going to make the 3 variations. We've seen that in all of the Adobe software, like Photoshop, that has bothered to do generative features so far. And then we've got, it's showing me my outline so that I know that these are the paths. These are actually the paths it's making, by the way. And it's showing me that they are genuine path outlines. All right, now let's say I want to scale this, because I could have created it inside that rectangle, or approximately the size of the rectangle, but or you could just scale it after the fact. With the bounding box on, I could shift drag a handle, so I'm scaling it proportionally as opposed to squishing it. And if I press the Alt or Option key as well, I'm scaling it from the center outward. So I have this big burger, and now I can switch between my burgers, between my 3 variations right there. And then if I don't like any of them, I can click on that generate button, and it's going to generate 3 more, as we're seeing. And it's going to give me a tip, which is kind of cool. Some of the tips are really useful. And then we'll see the outlines once again, so that we know we're generating multiple genuine path outlines. There's nothing artificial about these. They're immediately accessible, by the way, in case you were wondering what the heck I was trying to say. And now I can switch between them just like so. And if I was wanting to do something different, you know, I could say, gosh, if I'm going to go into the burger business and I'm going to have to compete with the quarter pounder, then I'm going to have to make burgers that are better than the rest, let's say. So you can enter your own prompt, of course, and you can edit an existing prompt, and then you just have to press the enter key. Now what's happening, in addition to it generating the 3, variations, and it's giving us this prompt, and we can see the outlines, is it's communicating with Adobe Firefly, the online AI image generation app, which we'll see in just a moment, which means, among other things, that it's getting this real-time feedback from Firefly, which is generating the image, and then it's tracing it, by the way. And so really the important thing here that I really want you to keep in mind, and I'll just click generate again so I can talk while something's happening here on screen, is that you need a live internet connection. I haven't heard a single person say that. If you don't have a live ongoing internet connection, just to unplug your Ethernet, do something to test it out for yourself. As things stand now, today, by the time you see this video, it may change. They may get an error message. but they don't even have the decency to give you an error message right now. The panel just ignores you, just doesn't work. It kind of sits there for a moment like it's working, and then it doesn't do anything. It's like crickets. It's kind of like Illustrator's like, did you do something? Because I didn't. No, I'm pretty sure you didn't. I'm the big, powerful software that shows you the contextual taskbar when I feel like it. You are just the user. Anyway, I want to show you kind of what's going on under the hood here. So I'll just go ahead and minimize Illustrator for a moment so that we can see here's a beloved Firefly running in the background. And if you don't know about it, it's firefly.adobe.com. It's a web app. And so I've got it running inside of a browser. It happens to be Chrome, doesn't really matter. But notice this is big, juicy burger branding. So that would be that prompt we saw just a moment ago. And it's photographic style. So this is the kind of stuff that Firefly Model 2 is creating, by the way. So very spiffy indeed. But let's say I want to change it so that Illustrator can work with it a little better, because this is what Firefly does for Illustrator automatically. It turns off photo, so it clears the style for starters. Then it turns on art. And by the way, in my description, I have a link to a video I did several weeks ago in which I showed how to do this in Illustrator, how to do exactly what I'm showing you, which is what Firefly does for Illustrator pretty much exactly. I just figured this was the way they're going to work, just because, I've been using these Adobe programs for a while. It goes down to themes. This is what Firefly is doing, and it goes with this guy, Vector Look, right there, Vector Look. Notice that, not vectors, Vector Look. I'll click generate, and I come up with these splashy vectors right here. What's interesting about them? They're all pixels. They're not vectors at all. This doesn't say vectors. This says Vector Look, and that's because Firefly is only capable, as things stand now, it will be this way for a little while, only capable of creating pixels, and that's because it uses a diffusion model. It starts with noise, and so that doesn't work for vectors. It could come up with a tracing system, which is what Illustrator has, don't you know? And so basically, if you do this, you create your own Vector Look graphic, and then you take it into Illustrator and you auto trace it. That's what my video was all about, incidentally. And that's what Illustrator is doing now automatically for you. So it just does all what we saw in the background, and then it brings it in, and it got rid of the background, right? It made it white instead of having all that junk there. And then it traced it very elegantly. Well, if you know the tracing feature, the image trace feature, you know that it offers a whole bunch of options. As I say, got that video. And but we got just a few control options right here. It's very simple. Settings right there. Detail, less, more. And by default, I think it's set to 2. You can crank it up to 5. It won't happen immediately. It won't apply to the selection. And so what you got to do is click generate, and it regenerates. Does it generate from your existing hamburger? In my case, no, it does not. Not even sort of. Doesn't take the existing hamburger into account one way or other, just starts over from scratch. And this time, whereas it was giving you kind of relatively few path outlines before, it's taking longer. You may have noticed that. And it's going to give you more where this juicy hamburger is concerned. All right. Another thing I want you to know. All right, so those of you who are used to generative fill in Photoshop, you know that you got to keep it clean, right? You can't just accumulate all your generative fills, because that it's just, first of all, we're going to be charged credits, of course, but also because it makes the files way, way huge, gigabyte and bigger on disk. And that's because it's working with smart objects. There is a kind of connection between Firefly and Photoshop, whereas there's no connection between Illustrator and Firefly. It did. It's already connected. Firefly gave it a hamburger, and it traced it, and it's done. But what happens as a result is, and this, I'm not sure if this is a good idea or not, but basically Illustrator just keeps all your hamburgers. In my case, it keeps all the stuff you created, even if you undo. So I'm undoing, Control-Z, Command-Z on the Mac. I'm just undoing like crazy. It's undoing the stuff inside the illustration, but it's not undoing anything inside the text to vector graphic panel. So all those things are still there. They're still going to be part of your graphic, even if you undo, or in my case now, redo, all that stuff, all that same stuff is there. So it's keeping track of who you clicked on, but that's it. If you want to delete these and get rid of the garbage, you have to click on this little ... icon and choose delete variation. The way things stand, you have to do that manually for each one of them. You want to learn how to get around that? Just get rid of all of them? Go to my Patreon, patreon.com/geeknow. Anyway, all right, so that's one thing I wanted to show you. Another thing is, I think there's a group of people. So Von Glitchka, he's this amazingly talented artist, by the way. He tweeted a couple of weeks ago now that he was at Max. And my overall takeaway that we're talking about this feature, you'll see a lot more crappy vector art moving forward, thanks to this feature. The text to vector, see, he calls it text to vector. He didn't call it graphic. Generative AI feature should be titled text to clip art. Man, do I not disagree with that. That is totally true. This is a lovely piece of clip art, by the way, that Illustrator created for me automatically and for free is worth, at this point, there's going to be credits, blah, blah, blah. All the reels you'll be seeing hyping it. Now, here I am getting along with Vaughn. What's he got to do that thing for? All the reels you'll be seeing hyping it. Those are fighting words. Won't scrutinize the original and poor craftsmanship. I'm just going to do a slight little edit there, and we'll just get rid of that because it's not poor craftsmanship. It's not really craftsmanship, actually. It's robotics. It's machine learning. But unoriginal, I'll go with original, and I will scrutinize it a little bit. But I just want to say, it's okay that it's creating clip art. I'm coming out in defense because this is one of Vaughn's pieces of hand-drawn artwork, human-created, if you will. And I'd say it's a heck of a lot better than anything you're going to make text-to-vector do, by the way. And isn't that kind of the way we want it? Do we want it to come right out of the gate, killing all of us, just destroying the creatives? All right, so I just want to make that point. But the other thing is how incredibly complicated these things are, even though they're not linked at all to Firefly anymore. So like this burger right here, selected, right? And you can see over here on the far left side of the control panel, you could also see it in the properties panel. If you're a properties fan, you could see the word group, and that's telling you it's just a group. It's not saying like clipping group or anything remarkable about this group. It's just a group. So here inside the layers panel, the essential needs to be on screen all the time layers panel. I'll twirl open this layer, which I call blank, whatever. And there's a group. There's the group inside of it. I'll twirl open that group. And notice, this is pretty interesting because you can twirl open groups in Illustrator. And inside this group, which you could just ungroup. If you want to get access to all the objects in there, you can ungroup. And it's not going to hurt you because there is no link that you're breaking, by the way. So just ungroup away. And I want you to see, though, that there's something crazy here. There's all these things that are in their own subgroup, tons of path outlines that are also in their own subgroups. But there's this thing that's hidden. And I'll just go ahead and turn it on. So there's so much more to all these things have them. All these hamburgers, they got inset groups where the background is turned on. Like there's more that you could blend with other stuff inside of your existing illustration if you wanted to. So I just want to encourage you that there is a ton going on where all these hamburgers are concerned that I was able to, and I admit I'm keeping it comprehensive, but I'm still just few minutes really creating all these hamburgers. And that is the kind of stuff you can do with text to vector inside Illustrator 2024. Hey, super quick. One of the odd and I think irritating things about text to vector is that by default, Illustrator saves every variation you come up with. Like even if you don't use a graphic, it hangs around like a smelly old sock cluttering up your document. Want to learn how to clear out every single variation in one easy undocumented operation? Then join me at my Patreon, which is patreon.com/geeknow. Which also gets you 50% off my new course in progress, Photoshop 2024 one-on-one in real time as I create it. And now, back to text to vector. Now we'll see how you can use text to vector graphic to invent whole scenes, entire pieces of artwork, if you will. Yes, clip art. We've established that. Now notice here in the text to vector graphic panel starts off with this option called type. At least that's the way it works right now. And by default, it's set to subject. And so you can think of all these guys as being foreground objects. right? Groups of path outlines, albeit, however, they describe identifiable objects such as a big juicy burger or a cute baby dragon or this skull right here or whatever it is that you decide to describe with your custom text prompt. Now, the advantage of these is that you can mix them and match them and put them on different layers and transform them independently. They have room for transparency so they can interact with each other. Compare that to scene, which is going to be one big bounding box full of artwork. Now, it can be elaborate if you wanted to. You can describe, with your text prompt, the foreground and the background and a whole kit and caboodle. But I might recommend, in fact, I'm going to recommend that you only describe the background as your scene. And that way you keep all your foreground stuff, you describe those as subjects, keep all that stuff independent, and that way you can move it around. You're not going to have holes where things get punched out, and everything's going to be as flexible as possible. Now, before we go any further, I want to touch on a bit of esoteria, I'm afraid. And that's the fact that aspect ratios may be limited. And that's not maybe. They are going to be limited right now. And what I'm saying is you can draw any rectangle as a bounding box that you want to, but Illustrator isn't going to exactly fill it. And that's because of our good buddy, Adobe Firefly right here. And so notice my hamburgers are all taller than they are wide, so they're portrait, in other words, and that's a function of the way I set the aspect ratio. It's set to 3:4. The first value is the width, second value is the height. And so 3:4, what? Anything is the answer. So just whatever three you have, 3 17mm increments, then it's 4 17mm increments for the height, approximately. By the way, anyway, you also have landscape, so you're going to have these same 4 in Illustrator, but you just don't specify. You don't tell Illustrator this, you just do it, and it just kind of does it for you is actually what happens. Anyway, landscape 4:3, square, you can count on this one by one, and that is the default, and then widescreen 16:9, which is going to get you some wider art. And so notice here I am inside of a blank document in Illustrator, and I'll switch to scene. And I'll just go with one of these pre-defined sample prompts that sort of, that I fancy. This guy right here, vintage car on a highway, desert, sunset, retro poster design. Adobe tends to lean into the vintage retro thing, but let's give it a try. And so all you have to do is click on it to get it going. Notice that Illustrator is communicating with Firefly. That's what these mean. Then a moment later, it's communicated, it's gotten back the pixel art, and it's traced it with all these vector path outlines that we're seeing right here. But a moment later, we're going to see it progress into some colorful artwork. And that's the point at which Illustrator is actually coloring the artwork with a bunch of fills, by the way. No strokes, only fills. I don't want to see those path outlines, so I'll press Control-H or Command-H on the Mac to hide them. Now, mostly you're going to see flat fills, frankly. Although you may see the occasional linear gradient the way things stand now. So I'll just switch from one of these variations to another. That's okay, I suppose. This one, none of them are that hot. Do you think? So I'm just going to try it again. And that gives me the opportunity to tell you, here we are. This is color commentary. Now, Illustrator has gotten back to pixel art and it's traced it with these path outlines, but it hasn't made any color decisions. So it's doing that right now. And now it's showing you what those color decisions are. Let's see. Well, we do get these stair-stepped path outlines. That's kind of cool. That's pretty darn cool, actually. I like that. And but we're not. There's one. There's a linear gradient right there. You might catch sight of the occasional radial gradient. You never know. I don't like cars driving away from me. I like him coming toward me, like this guy right here. Notice, however, that I have a square. And that is the default aspect ratio. That's what Illustrator is going to give you if you don't ask for anything else. Now, the artwork's not even going to, especially when you're working with subject, it's not always going to fit that square the way you think it might. But when you're working with scene, as we are right now, it's going to exactly fit the square. I want it to fit my artboard, so I'll get rid of that. And I'll zoom out. There's my artboard right there, the white rectangle. That red rectangle is the bleed boundary, which, if nothing else, think of it as being useful for borderless printing. And so you can basically create artwork outside of the artboard, which is a great way to go. And to make sure that happens, I'm going to describe a bounding box using the rectangle tool. Now, I want you to know you can use any shape tool you want. You can use the ellipse tool. You can use the star tool. It's not going to clip inside of a star, though. It's not going to clip inside of an ellipse. It's just going to make a bounding box that's approximately that size. So you're better off using the rectangle tool. All right, now, because it's going to be a rectangle. And so now what I'll do is go to the view menu and choose smart guides because I want to exactly trace the red bounding box. And so I'll do it by going here. Notice that I'm intersecting right there in the top left corner down to the bottom right corner. I have exactly traced the red bounding box. I just want you to see that. That may surprise you in just a moment. So anyway, if you go with one of these guides you've already made, that's fine. It's going to be a square. And that's because the aspect ratio has been determined. So you can come back to it all you want, but that's just a fact. If you want a new aspect ratio, if you want it to match the new rectangle, then make sure you got your prompt and then click generate right there. And now it's going to do its thing once again, and it's going to better match, not entirely, you'll see, better match that rectangle communicating with Firefly. Now it's done. Now it's made its path outlines. Now it's traced, in other words, but it hasn't made the color decisions. And now it's about to make those color decisions. Oh my gosh, doesn't that look great? And now we don't have squares for what it's worth. Do we have we do. We've got, no, that looks to me like a radial gradient right there. That's cool. And then we've got this guy and coming toward us and this guy as well. I just think these are so great. They're so wonderful, don't you know? What's the flaw? Well, two. I'm going to argue there's two flaws. One, it didn't match the size of my rectangle. My rectangle was the size of the red bounding box. You just saw it. You were here. You're a witness a moment ago. But it didn't match it. And that's because it went to its closest aspect ratio it can do, which happens to be approximately 4:3. We'll dig into that in just a moment. And the other thing is, I don't want a foreground built into my background. I don't want foreground and background both together because there's no way. Let's say I even decide to add another car in using the subject setting. There's no way I'm going to match this perspective. That's just not possible the way things are right now. So what you're better off doing is just describing a background. I'm going to paste in my own custom prompt here, rocky landscape in southwestern United States. Just because I was just recently in the southwestern United States, the Four Corners area. You know that, right? And it's just the most beautiful area on the planet. I swear to you. If ever you're just sitting there going, hey, where should we go on a road trip? Then you throw everybody in the car and go to eastern Utah. You can't go wrong there. It's just so beautiful. But anyway, it obviously Illustrator knows that. Firefly and Illustrator working together are well aware that eastern Utah is where it's at, and came up with all this stuff right here, even though it doesn't match, of course, the rectangle that I drew. All right, so let's take a look at this. It's a theoretically esoteric issue that will bite you. It will. And so notice this is the same artboard, by the way. We're just not seeing that gray area around because we're not seeing any of the layers. And there's my red rectangular bleed boundary. But what I decided to do was draw a rectangle that's way wider, so I don't have that problem where it gets clipped. And so it's just 4:3. This time it's 16:9, but not really. So what I'm going to do is click on this group that Illustrator created for me. And I've got all kinds of variations here in this panel that I can work from. It's kind of difficult to tell who's who, but you can fish around in there and figure it out. I think that's the guy I'm working with. Let's see. Yeah, that is also one of its compatriots right there. That is too. They're all the same aspect ratio. And to see what that looks like, I go up here to the control panel, the horizontal control panel, which I totally approve of. And it's telling me the width. These happen to be points, but that doesn't matter. 1560, they could be, millimeters. It doesn't matter. And 892. So width, 1560, height, 892. If you were to just take 1560 and divide it by 892, nothing special, nothing fancy, on your calculator, not in your head, don't injure that, then you would get 1.75 to 1. So it's 1.75 wide to 1 tall, which doesn't really ascribe exactly to any common aspect ratio. The common one is 16:9. which it is approximately equal to, not quite. This white rectangle right here, that is 16 by 9. And so really 1.75 to 1 is a little narrower. Just, FYI. If I drew the rectangle I drew in front of you, it's gonna, snap is the word I'm looking for, to something resembling 4 by 3, not quite, but it's really 1.38 to 1, which is, I'll go up here and I'll just turn on, see, there's 4 by 3. So it's actually a little wider than a 4 by 3 aspect ratio. If I was working vertically, it would be a little taller than a 3 by 4. And what it is really is closer to 11 by 8, or vertically 8 by 11. So kind of a letter-sized piece of paper. That would be 8.5 by 11, but whatever. Anyway, and then finally square. It nails squares. That's just 1 by 1 right there. That rectangle. So it is exactly a square that we're looking at right now. All right, so after all that, all those caveats, what might you want to really do with this feature? Well, what I'm thinking is create a scene background and then add, in the form of this campsite right here, but it's haunted with these ghosts that are all described as subjects, as foreground subjects. And so how might that work? Well, I'll go ahead and switch back to blank document, which isn't blank right now, so I'll get rid of that guy. But, even though I don't want any of these things anymore, they linger. Again, patreon.com/teaknow if you want to get rid of them. But here's what I'm going to do instead. I'm going to draw a big rectangle right there, the size of the bounding box, approximately. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to do it the size of the bounding box. And I'm going to go with one of the presets. Now, I can't see them right now because all I'm seeing are my variations from the car and from, the Rockies, Southwest United States. You got to click right here if you want to see those again. Select a sample prompt. And it gives you a little pop-up menu of those. And then I can grab this guy, magical campfire around tents, minimal, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then it starts communicating. You can read it right there if you're curious. Or look at your own version of Illustrator 2024. But notice that it is communicating now. It's traced the path outlines. And now a moment later, it's going to assign all those delicious fill colors in order to basically create a kind of color scheme. Now, it's not filling my space at all, is it? And I can click through these, by the way, to decide which one I like best. Is it gonna be just the single tent with the campfire in front of it? Just the tent, the one tent. Let's go with the one tent with the campfire to the side. Or we could go with the tree. Oh, that's cold. That looks cold to me. All right, let's go with this guy. It's awfully purple, but I'm gonna press the V key to switch back to my black arrow tool up here at the top of the toolbox. And I'm just gonna Alt drag this side handle in order to basically stretch both the left and right hand sides at the same time. And because it's just a background, who cares if the fire's narrow or it's wide or any of that? If I did care, I'd have to add the shift key, but I don't. So I'll just make it wider so that it fills up the space. But you're just gonna have to be ready for that kind of stuff to happen. Thanks to the fact you watched my video, which went on and on about aspect ratio, to watch out for it. The others don't, because they didn't get that long-winded description. Anyway, I'm going to call this guy, let's say, campfire, right there. And then I'm going to create a new layer by alt-clicking on this little plus icon at the bottom of the layers panel. I'll call this guy ghosts, because that's what it's going to be. It's going to be a bunch of ghosts. Or let's go ahead and spell it, not with a J, although I like that spelling, with an H, and that's where I'll put this. And then I'll lock down my campfire, just so I don't mess it up. Because you can, mess up the artwork because it's just a bunch of path outlines that are grouped together. All right, now I'll zoom in, and now I'll switch over from scene to subject, just because that way we're not filling a rectangular area. That way we're allowing for transparency. And that's just the general difference between scene and subject. And so I'm not going to draw anything here. I'm just going to say I don't want a magical campfire this time around. I could go ahead and generate that if I wanted to, and it's going to communicate with Firefly and the whole number. But then notice once it gets done creating these things that they have transparent backgrounds, and you can change that by spinning open the group and checking out if it's got something in the background. That's not useful. But, maybe this guy's cool. And then you could add a separate tent if you wanted to. So see, that's the big difference between scene and subject. Scene fills the entire rectangle. Subject leaves room for transparency. And so you might like that. Anyway, I don't want to add more tents. I could. With their own campfires? That's nuts. I'm going to say, however, instead, I'm going to say translucent dancing ghosts. I'd like them to be translucent. Unfortunately, they're not. The word translucent doesn't currently register with Firefly. And I think it's because Firefly doesn't do translucent. You know what I mean? It's just pixels, and they're just pixels in the context of working inside Firefly. So when it gets thrown over to Illustrator, even though it's capable of translucency, slight transparency, in other words, it's not going to do the right thing where that's concerned. Anyway, notice we've got these ghosts right here, and they have kind of these weird little things that aren't filled in. And you can, once again, I urge you to twirl open your groups and check out the contents of the groups and see if there's anything you can use in there in order to fill in those ghosts, or not. Also, by the way, notice I left behind a group right there. I got to turn it on. I got to be able to see it. I left it behind. I got to get rid of it. I don't want that. Anyway, back to this guy. And now I could fill it with one of the others. She's a very pretty ghost. And then we have this ghost with an aura that we could work with as well. Now, let's say you're like, wait a second. This is like from a different dimension, which makes sense. It's a ghost, by the way, but I want it to match the active artboard style. Well, then just turn on that switch. Notice it doesn't affect what's been done because there is no affecting what's been done. It's done. What you have to do now is click Generate once again in order to generate a new group of ghosts, which this time around are going to match the color scheme of that background art right there. And so let's say you don't want to replace her. You could with these others that are really cool, but you just want to keep her there. But you also want to add another ghost. Why, then what you can do is just drag and drop. I'm going to drag and drop this second one right there. And you can either just click in order to let Illustrator decide the size, or you can drag because you have that place cursor right there. Notice it's wider than it is tall, a little bit, I think. It's not exactly square, but it's going to fill the bounding box as it chooses to. All right, so now let's say I want to put I'm kind of fishing around here. Let's say I want to put a ghost behind the fire. Well, because all of these things, because a single scene is going to have a bunch of different pieces of path outline that are punched out from each other. That's important. They abut each other. They don't overlap. And so let me show you, and this is true for the subject stuff as well. And so let me unlock the campfire, the background, and let me lock the ghosts just for a moment. And so I'm going to click on that background and select it. I'll press Control H. That's Command H on the Mac, of course, to bring back the path outline so I can see them. And I'm going to twirl open this group. That's the layer. Then I'm going to twirl open the group. So you got to be pretty comfortable working inside the layers panel. And then I'm going to turn off that group, that subgroup that's inside. Notice I'm going to just turn off those ghosts for a second. I want you to see that this is the campfire by itself with the tent, by the way. And then we've got kind of everything else, all that background stuff independent. So apparently the tent, the fire, and the mountains are all in the same group. So what you might do, is this going to be successful? Well, maybe a little bit. It'd be ideal if the mountains were separated from the fire. But I just want you to see, I'll double click on this group just so I'm digging into the group right here, and I'm in the isolation mode while I double click. So you keep burrowing down into the group, and you can see that this guy's an independent subgroup. So I want to stress this, even though these things are punched out from each other, and that's kind of a nuisance, and maybe it'd be better if each one of the objects were on top of each other to make it more editable. The fact that we have all of these subgroups that Illustrator has figured out how to create for us is amazing. I'm dug way down inside these groups. And so I'm going to click on this, shift click on this part of the fire and see. Ooh, I got it. I got that independent. So let's say I'll undo the movement and I'll cut it by pressing Control X, Command X on the Mac. Heavy duty, but now I'll just press the escape key to back out of all this isolation that I've done, and I'll turn all that background stuff back on, and I'll twirl close campfire, and I'll bring back the ghosts. So I hope you're following my reasoning here. And now what I'm going to do is create yet another layer so that it's for the fire, and I'll alt click or option click on the create new layer, that little thing, the little plus sign, and I'll call this fire, and I'll change the color to whatever I think is pleasing, like gold. Click OK, and press Control F or Command F on the Mac to paste the fire in front of the ghost. And now notice if I grab the ghost, oh, it's on a locked layer, so I'll unlock the layer. I'll grab this ghost right here, and I can set it behind the fire now. So it's not as limited as it might all seem. At first, it's just going to seem like editing these things is like kind of a minor nightmare. But once you come to terms with the groups nested inside the groups, you might find it to be pretty great, pretty useful. And then I could even change the blend mode. Go up here because it didn't recognize that I wanted translucent ghosts. So I'll click on opacity and change the blend mode to, let's try hard light. That looks cool, doesn't it? This guy should be the same way. It should be set to hard light as well. You could go screen, of course, but that's just too bright for me. And but that would be kind of ghostly, but I'll go with hard light. And then you could reduce the opacity value if you wanted to. I'm going to leave it alone. All right, one more thing I want to show you. I'm going to deselect everything. So beautiful. Isn't that just beautiful? No, it's not. But, you know, it's verging on beauty. I want to show you something here. What if you're working with a background is some kind of background artwork or some kind of, you know, fully realized landscape scene that you did not create using text to vector graphic. You either created it yourself all with your own little hands, or this comes from the Dreamstime image library. For what it's worth, you can find out more about them in the description. But what I want to show you is then I could say, well, do I want dancing ghosts in this scene, or do I just, no, I know what I want. I want a big alien head. And so let's request one, shall we? Just by pasting in a new prompt, an enormous alien head statue right there. And I click generate, and it's communicating with Firefly once again. And then once it starts getting the imagery back, I really want to make sure you understand. That's when it traces it, and that's when you're going to see these path outlines, which again are accurate. It's just that they're so small, you're not really going to see them in any degree of detail. And then it's assigning all of its colors that are matching the active artboard style thanks to this switch right here. At which point I could say, okay, I really want this to be much bigger because I want it to be kind of ominous in the background. It doesn't really contain, is one of these other guys kind of more, he's more ominous, isn't he? And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to twirl open, this is locked, but I'm going to unlock it. I just want you to notice that this match active artboard style works with locked layers. It's totally okay with locking. And now if I twirl this open, I might see a bunch of different groups that have been established by the artist. But this time, let's see, I want this stuff in here. That's what I want. This guy right here, in fact, is what I want. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy it. I'm going to cut it to its own independent layer. Is that going to work? I guess it is. I'm a little confused about what I'm doing, so be patient. And now I'll create a new layer by Alt or Option, clicking on that plus icon. I'll call this, question marks, because I don't know what's going to happen here. And I'll click OK, and I'll press Control F or Command F on the Mac. And it does paste that in front, and then it's a little bit transparent. For some reason, the opacity value is set to 50%. So let's crank it up to 100%. And that's not quite, there's a bunch of different objects inside of there. But you get the idea. Depending on your particular artwork, you might be able to successfully put it in back of something. Or I might be able to take this guy. I wonder if I cut it. Let's cut it. Let's do a Control X on it. I want a successful outcome. We'll turn off that new layer I created, and let's just select this garbage that's inside. This isn't grouped because this is a different kind of artwork. It's created by human beings, not machines. And so I'll select a bunch of stuff and hit Control B. Command B on the Mac to paste in Mac. See, isn't it rewarding to have a successful outcome instead of just leaving a project without having it done properly? And those are a few thousand different ways that you can use text-to-vector graphic to invent whole scenes in Illustrator 2024. All right, now we're going to see how you can create and edit yet another category of text-to-vector graphic object, and that is the so-called icon. I say so-called because they are icons. They could be logos, though, rough and tumble. I'm going to emphasize that because they're not going to be like perfectly formed. They're not going to be symmetrical, for example. Exactly. And because there are no strokes, the thickness of the lines in quote fingers, because they're going to be filled path outlines, are not going to be consistent and so forth. So maybe you're going to seek inspiration and redraw something, or maybe you just want something real rough. You know, you got somebody who needs a quick logo. Well, you know, this might serve the bill. And hey, along the way, I'll show you how to work with the style picker. Now, I know there are going to be people you talk to who are going to say, you know, I'm not really that fond of that text-to-vector graphic feature inside Illustrator 2024. To which you might say, does it not, for a version 1.0 feature, does it not offer enough sub-features for you? Like the style picker? Do you even know about that one? Well, I'll show you how that works. Let's start here. And these are some professionally created custom icons from Dreamstime. Once again, learn about it in the description. For now, we'll come back to those. I'm going to turn those off. They're people, right? With hands and stuff. I don't know. Anyway, I've got this blank icons layer right here. And so I'm going to go up to the window menu and choose text-to-vector graphic to bring back that panel that we love so much. And I'm going to switch the type to icon this time around, and we seem to have a bunch of scene elements in here already. Oh, I didn't know about that. That is what I was talking about with cluttering your panel. You know, do you really want that? Do we have some subject stuff too? Yeah, I got a bunch of dragons. What was I doing inside this document? Anyway, I'm going to switch to icon. That should be, well, not blank. It's got the presets right here. And so let's say we start off with something. Now I want to show you, I'm going to click on this gear that I believe this is a default setting with that detail is set to less, all the way, crank to less, 1, with the value is 1, that is. And I believe that's a default that might be a desirable value to keep things nice and simple. So you're reining in the anchor points. You don't want too many anchor points. You don't want a bunch of wiggling going on. And so I'll go ahead and click on this guy right here. I'll hover for a second. Geometric fox face with minimal detail. A lot of these sample prompts here have the word minimal in them. Minimal planet with ring. We got a minimal butterfly. And so I guess that keeps down the path outlines, reduces the amount of wiggle you might experience. Now, you will see, just as always, all these things could be interchangeable with each other. Once again, like a subject, it's got transparency built in to it, an icon does. But anyway, we're seeing this develop, and then we get a fox face right there. I'm going to make this guy a little bigger just so it takes up more of the screen. Now you have the usual 3 variations, so you can switch between them to your heart's content. Now I want you to see, notice how this guy's got a little pimple over on this side. He is not symmetrical. Do not expect symmetry out of your icon. So notice if I switch over here to the reflect tool, it's this guy right here, then I could just press the enter key to bring up the reflect dialog box. It's set to axis is set to vertical, so you're going to perform a horizontal flip by default. And so I'll just click on preview. And so it's not entirely, notice this is before, this is after. So it's not entirely symmetrical. And that's kind of a big condemnation, really, when you think about it, because would you, if you were drawing just a basic fox face and you were trying to come up with that icon or logo, would you just kind of like click sort of around and about with the pen tool and kind of get things more or less symmetrical like this feature does? No, you wouldn't. and also the pimples over on this side, and then it goes over onto this side. So you're going to see some things flip around. Kind of mostly symmetrical, but not entirely. So I just want uniformity is another thing I was saying that it's not going to get exactly right. Even if you want to try this out, I'm going to crank detail up to more, all the way to 5. No sense in being subtle here because I want to see what the difference is going to be. And this time around, we get some much more elaborate foxes indeed. There's this guy. Is that really a fox? This one, that's a wolf, don't you think? And this one, I think, is going to be a badger. That's looking like a badger to me. So apparently, if you crank up the detail, you're going to get also a different variety of animals going on. But you could see some extra sort of path outlines just sitting out and about, so that's something to keep an eye out for. What I'm going to do, though, I just, for the sake of demonstration here, first of all, I'm going to click on settings and crank this back down to less. Might as well keep things as simple as possible, and then I'll click on the light bulb, and I'll select this guy, Abstract Minimal again. Butterfly with gradient-filled wings. So apparently you can ask for gradients. That surprises me. I don't mean to act like I don't know exactly what's going on with every single detail of this feature, but I'm under the impression that the prompt is going to Firefly, and that the word gradient, in other words, would be interpreted by Firefly, not by Illustrator. Illustrator's just tracing what it gets. But I might be wrong about that, because there might be trigger words for Illustrator, in other words, because we are seeing a gradient, a bunch of gradients actually, inside of an otherwise very simple object. And then this one has some thickness around the outside, but no, it's not stroked. Notice these are filled path outlines, so they are not going to be consistent in thickness, as you might expect with a stroke. And they're not going to be uniform, in other words. And here's another guy. Whether he recommends the feature or not, I don't know. But let's say I want to take this guy, and I want to edit it. And so I want to show you how you might approach it, because some of you are going to want to edit what you see, and others of you are not going to want to repeat what I have to go through here. You're going to want to just say, gosh, that's a really nice butterfly. I love it, including all those little stabby things up here. And so I'm going to redraw it. That's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to try to edit this. That might be the better way to go, and I'll show you why. Because, so here we are in the layers panel, right? I created this icons layer in advance. It was otherwise blank. So the only thing on it is this butterfly. I'll twirl open the icons layer. Twirl, because this twirly triangle right here, which does twirl when you click on it. Now twirl open the group. Look, it's got hidden stuff in it. So I'll turn that on. All right, that's not something I want. What you want to do, you want to start cleaning this up, right? Yes, you do. And so the first thing is to make sure this guy is selected, the entire group, so it's targeted. See that circle right there? And then you want to go up to the object menu and choose the ungroup command. Now, you only want to do this if you're working on a clean layer like I am. There's nothing else in this document to worry about. The other stuff is turned off right now. And so we're just going to ungroup like crazy, because there's nested groups, and they get really super nested. In other words, groups inside groups inside groups. They can be like a dozen groups deep. It's amazing. Actually, I have to give Illustrator credit, but sometimes that makes it difficult to edit these things. So what I'm saying is memorize this keyboard shortcut for goodness sake. You don't want to have to choose the ungroup command over and over and over again like some kind of monkey. You want to press this keyboard shortcut, Control-Shift-G or Command-Shift-G on the Mac like a monkey. And that way you can just press the heck out of it and ungroup this thing like crazy. And so now at this point, I press the V key to switch to my black arrow tool. I have no idea. Oh, it's the reflect tool that was selected before. I'll click. So I clicked away to deselect everything. I'll click on this thing now, this background item right there, which is actually called background. It'll get rid of it. And now I'll click on the object again, which is still a group. And now I'm just going to go nuts with the ungrouping. So notice the word group over on the far left side of the control panel. You'll see it inside the properties panel. Those of you who love to waste screen real estate, it's there too. But anyway, I'm just going to hammer on Control-Shift-G a bunch of times. That's Command-Shift-G on the Mac. Did you see that last one right there? Notice it went from mixed objects, which is okay if there's compound paths along with path outlines, but there's not. I haven't seen compound paths out of this feature so far. So your best nailing Control Shift or Command Shift G, just pressing it is what I mean, until as many times as it takes until you just see the word path. That doesn't mean you have one path. That means you have a bunch of different path outlines that you can work with. And then what I can do is click on this. See this path right there? I can grab it. And then let's say I want to make it black. Do you remember where I'm going with this? And so, but there's some other blobby stuff that's this color as well. And so I'll go over here to the control panel. Some of you may be like familiar with this icon is what I'm looking for. Was the word. Select similar selects. What I don't know what I was saying. I was going to say it again, but I'm not going to because I don't know. I'm going to click select similar object right there, and that's going to get all these guys that are the same by default anyway, and it does. And now I'm going to make black like so. That's cool. And you know what? I'm going to go further with this. I'm going to marquee the antenna and shift click on the body, and I'm going to make them black as well because I really want to demonstrate. Now we got a stained glass kind of butterfly going. Now what I would recommend you do is go ahead and marquee that guy with the black arrow tool, so you just have to partially marquee the objects. But select all of them and then regroup them. Why not? Go to the object menu and choose group. Also has a keyboard shortcut right there, which is simpler for monkeys the world around. Just Control G, Command G on the Mac. And the reason I suggest you do that is because now you have a contained object. Now, what you might figure is, because especially if you look over here at this little variation right there, you might figure, yay, Illustrator updated it for me. No, it did not. No, it did not. There is no interaction going on with this panel and anything, really. It's no longer interacting with Firefly. It will in the future. But, you know, these are static objects, and they do not update. So your change is not something that Illustrator is keeping track of. Also, it made the thing smaller. That's just because it's misdiagnosing the new bounding box. Anyway, that doesn't matter. But I just want you to know what you can't not do. You can't do that. And also, you can't do this. You might be like, well, that's okay. That's all right. It can just stay there. I can come back to it sometime maybe. I'll just grab this guy and drag him and drop him into the panel. Nope, you're not going to do that. That little Ghostbuster icon is red to show you really can't do that one. So that is not the way to go. I just want you to know there's not going to be a relationship between whatever modifications you make and your variations that are stored in this panel. But don't lose it. Don't throw it away. I'll just call this guy, let's say, Butterfly. My Butterfly, I could call it because it's mine. And I'd create a new layer by Alt or Option clicking on this little plus icon, and I'll call this guy Icons because I'm going to create some more. And I'll come with a more comforting color like gold. Always love gold. Click OK and turn off my custom butterfly right there so that I'm working from scratch. All right, so let's try something different, shall we? I'll click on obviously you can enter your own stuff if you want to, but I'm gonna go with this guy, Geometric Sunflower, because it actually is pretty darn successful, and I want to show you that it does come up with sunflower colors, at least by default. So there we are. We're communicating. We got done communicating with Firefly, so far as I know. That's my understanding. And the path outlines are now drawn, and now it's trying to figure out how to go about filling them. That's something we have control over. You'll see that in just a moment. And there's my terribly beautiful sunflower, not remotely symmetrical. It's a kind of not even radial symmetry going on, but whatever. Anyway, it's kind of cool, right? And you might think that's a good place to start, or you might think that's not a sunflower, that kind of stuff. Those might be your reactions, but let's say you want control over the color scheme. Well, then you need some color schemes already at work inside your artwork. So I'll go ahead and turn those people back on there. And back on there is what I'm saying. And so now notice this tool right here, the style picker. Now, I think its name over promises. It's as if it's going to recognize the style of the graphic, like the fact that I have 3 stylized people with, brown heads right here. And then they've got these arms, these elaborate arms going on as well, heavily stylized. It's not going to see that. It's going to see the color scheme. That's all. Even though this color scheme is created using not only colors but also blend modes. Why, if you grab This tool right here, Style Picker, it's useful. I'm not dissing it too much. But don't click on anything that's selected. That doesn't work right now. Notice we get a little Ghostbuster icon. Instead, you want to click on something that's not selected, and it needs to be a big group. You want a big group. If this weren't grouped, if all these things weren't grouped together, and it's flashing because sometimes I'm off the object, sometimes I'm on. But if I just clicked on the head and it was ungrouped, then it will just go with that head color. But thanks to the fact that it's a group of stuff, then it's a bunch of different colors that Illustrator can work with. Is it going to work with them immediately? No, it's not. I think this is one of the most confusing things is my object didn't change. This tool clearly doesn't work, even though it's got a little check mark next to it to show that it now knows that it's got a selected style. But that's because these are static. You have to click Generate once again in order to rev the engines, in order to tell Illustrator to go for it and to go ahead and apply this color scheme that it's lifted to this sunflower pattern. Now, is it going to affect your pre-existing sunflower? No, it's not. No, the way things work right now, you're not building on what you've created. You're just starting again and again and again. And so, cool, right? Not a sunflower, but still it is a cool pattern. And it's not reading the fact that I've got a tertiary, right? A triad is what I mean, going on right there. It's just going its own way. That is one. I wish I had that sunflower at my home. I'm going to look into that, but I'm going to move this guy out of the way as well because I want to show you how to lift a different color scheme. So that's the browns, clearly, and it's not going to be necessarily a dead match or anything like that, but it is able to read them. I think that's actually pretty amazing. Now, let's say you want to read a different group of colors. Well, even though this tool is kind of behaving like it's selected, notice it's really the black arrow tool up here at the top of the toolbox on the left-hand side of the screen that's selected. And so what you have to do is turn this off because it's got that check mark. Turn it off. That's the way it works now. And then turn it back on. Watch the black arrow tool. I want you to see that. Just keep an eye on it. And I'll click on this again. It becomes the active tool. Notice the black arrow tool is no longer selected. We get an eyedropper. So this is, for a moment in time, the active tool. Now go and click on another group of objects here. All different colors. That's a great thing about groups. They accommodate all different kind of fills and strokes. Doesn't change the selection. Just sits there. Requires you, the human being, to go and click on the Generate button. And now we get a bunch of colors integrated into what we're seeing before. So I just want you to remember, of course, these were browns, but before we had sunflower colors. Well, even though we didn't necessarily have sunflower shapes. But now we have other colors. So it's matching. I don't know if you were taught this as a child, but the primary colors are red, yellow, and blue. That's what I was taught. That's not actually remotely true in any universe, but still, they don't mix with beans. But still, that is now what I've integrated into these. And sometimes it goes even more colorful. We got gradients, gradient sign right here. That's awesome. So if you want more colors still, why then you can turn off the current style and then click on this guy. Well, actually, you got to select the tool again. Sorry, it's a two-step thing. Click on the tool twice in a row. So to turn it off and then turn it back on. Then click on this. And this way, we should get some greens and purples, even though we already have kind of turquoise going on. And when, of course, you get around to clicking on that Generate button. And sure enough, we got purples and greens. We do. And we got orange and we got red. I guess that's the kind of red going on down there. We also have some pinks, which I did not request. But do we have much in the way of blues? Not really. There's just kind of some pale ones. But that's that. And this is this. So in other words, you still got those three variations, which I don't think is anything to sneeze at. We're getting more and more elaborate stuff going on, but that's because I'm requesting more colors. Now, here is an advanced thing. If this were really capable of lifting a style, it should lift a style, Adobe. I'm going to turn it off, and then I'm going to turn it back on. So we're going style hunting, and I'm going to click on this. But I want to emphasize it's not just colors. It's gradients, full-blown gradients. They're radial gradients that all emit from a central point. So they're all going off in different directions, 72 degrees different from each other, but that's something that Illustrator should be able to see, even a version 1.0 feature. If you're going to call it, notice we got the checkbox now because I clicked. If you're going to call it a style tool, whatever it's called. What's it called? A style picker. Now I got to click again and click on it and then click again. If you're going to call it a style picker, it should really lift the style. Anyway, I got to click generate. Of course, I got to get back to that button. I'm a very busy person here. And so is Illustrator. It's a very busy person. It is stocked to Firefly, and I believe, and that's my belief system. And then we now have a bunch of path outlines that's created, and now it's doing the work. It's applying the style. Don't you know? And we have gradients. Yay! At least it was thoughtful enough to recognize that we had gradients to work with. It doesn't always do that, but it's missing. What is it missing? It's missing blue. I don't see blue. A little bit of purple. Definitely green and gold and, well, not really red. But anyway, we got others that he's kind of got some gradient action going on. And that is a beautiful, elaborate, wacky looking sunflower. Dare I push it more? Speaking of elaborate, I'm going to crank it up to more detail, and I'm going to click generate again, and we're going to sit here while I tell you that is my take on icons, which I think I want to emphasize here. If you were really inspired by something like this right here, or whatever else Illustrator decides to come up with in the next few moments, then I would caution you, you can edit it, of course, if you want to ungroup and go at it, but you might want to just consider redrawing. Like that could be a real great base for a new drawing. This one, wow, that is something else. So there you have a sense of what you can do with icons using text-to-vector graphic inside Illustrator 2024. And now, for the fourth and final variety, if you will, of text-to-vector graphic, seamlessly repeating patterns. And they do indeed, if my experience is any indication, repeat seamlessly every single time. Now, patterns are a little different than what we've seen so far. For one thing, when you go to edit them, which itself is a different experience, you don't have to contend with all those nested groups. So you might find that to be a little bit refreshing. Also, they automatically populate the swatches panel as familiar pattern tiles, as we've had inside Illustrator forever and ever. And you can use them to stroke or fill any shape. And so that brings us to this. We're not limited to those rectangular bounding boxes the way we are with subjects and scenes and even icons. We can fill any shape without so much as a clipping mask. So go ahead and consider, if you will, these shapes right here, which once again come to us from Dreams Time, about which you can learn more in the description. And so I've combined them all the black shapes, the positives, as a single compound path. So I'll just go ahead and click on any one of them. And then if I go to the swatches panel and assign a fill like so, you can see that I do indeed change all of them. So I just want you to see that we're going to be applying patterns, however, by going to the window menu and choosing, of course, text to vector graphic, the easiest way to get to this feature. And I'm going to switch to pattern. The type, that is, the type option right there. And then you can see that we have all these patterns to choose from. And because the fill is active here in the swatches panel, could be the stroke, could just as easily be the stroke, I can just go ahead and click on any one of these sample prompts like abstract geographic maze. Geometric maze is what it actually said, if I could read properly. And that, by the way, is going to, once again, I've emphasized this more than anybody needs emphasis, but it's communicating with Firefly, so you need that live internet connection, don't you know? And now we're seeing the actual path outlines, and then a moment later, it's going to go ahead and assign some colors. The whole coloring thing is different where patterns are concerned. I didn't mention that, but I will show that to you. And so now I have managed to assign the first variation to the fill because the fill is active. And notice that first swatch has appeared here inside the swatches panel. So it's called text to pattern. It just automatically. And then if I click on the second variation, it will appear as a swatch. There in the swatches panel, it's now called text to pattern 2 and so forth. You can rename them if you want to. And I'll go ahead and click this guy. So, make sure to click every variation if you want to save those off as pattern tiles there in the swatches panel. All right, I'm not sure how successful this really is because it kind of doesn't really match the, it's not organic like the outlines of the faces. So I'll just go ahead and click on the old light bulb right there, and I'll switch to this guy, Graphic C Waves, and we'll see what it comes up with. Which, lo and behold, is this. And you know, every single time, I just can't emphasize this enough, can I? You're going to get different results. So you're not going to get anything like what I'm getting, but I'll go ahead and click on each one of them so that they become pattern tiles here inside the swatches panel, whether I really like them or not. Like, I don't like this at all. Now, thing is, right, it's going to make some graphic C waves. I don't know how much the graphic matters, or if I was to change it to ocean waves right here. But let's say I want to get more blue results, or at least cool colors. Then notice right there we've got this thing, new to this option, color controls right here. And we've got presets such as none, which is what's selected right now, but I could go with color tone, cool tone is what that says. And that's what I want, right? And then in order to apply that modification, those modifications, because I have graphic ocean waves, let's not make them graphic, shall we? It's just too graphic for me. I'll just go with ocean waves and click generate. That's my point. You got to click generate every single time in order to come up with entirely different results. So this guy looks pretty good, I guess. I don't really like that grayness. I don't like that we have a ton of different colors there. And, you know, I could maybe live with that one. Whatever. It's entirely up to you, don't you know? But there they are, living it up inside the swatches panel. All right, I'm going to go ahead and paste in my own custom thing right here. Large floral print on deep blue background. And I'll give it a try up front just to see if it works worth beans. Specifically, whether or not we get a deep blue background. Which might happen, you never know. And so here's the first variation, here's the second one, and here's the third one. Now, I wish we had a little more sort of natural stuff going on where the floral print is concerned. So let's call them floral outlines, shall we? Maybe we won't get those kind of, you know, rinky-dink looking. Actually, if I click on this, I'm going to go back to floral print. I want you to see that can be a kind of mistake if you're in the middle. But notice that the flowers are just kind of very flowery looking. So I'm going to go with floral outlines once again. Maybe actually insert the word organic. Does it like that? Let's see by clicking generate. And wow, that's pretty nice. I actually like that one quite a bit. It doesn't have a lot of color going on. And neither does this one, does it? And it's not really very deep blue, I don't think. And then we've got this. Since when are we going completely white with the flowers? Well, let's say I want to start with this one. But actually, I don't know why I'm saying that. You don't start, if you're going to generate more, you don't start with anything. But I'm going to click on this guy right here, and I'm going to say, hey, you know what? Let's get rid of the cool tone. We'll just go to none. We'll just be free for a minute. But I do want to specify some colors. So I'll click on this little plus sign, and that allows you to select colors from your swatches. So I'll go with this very deep blue right here. And then I'll click this next plus sign, and I'll go with this kind of orange, a deep orange, and we'll see how that turns out for us. And I might even add another color just so we have a little more to play with. Let's go with a kind of a lighter shade of kind of yellow orange right there. And then limit to, notice this, you can say that you want to limit it to just, I'll go with 4 colors and see what it comes up with. Now while we're looking at these colors right here, obviously you can add more, but what if you want to get rid of the colors? Because they're just going to hang out. I think it's a little bit of a design flaw that this is the way it works. There should be one that's just like trash them all. But what you got to do is you got to click on this one at a time right now, so far as I know, and then click on the little remove color icon, and then so each one you'd remove. Once you decide to go that route, which you will if you're following along with me, which you aren't. So anyway, got 4 colors. Here's 3 of them, and I just wanted to have some leeway, don't you know? So it has some room to succeed and some room to fail. I think that's important. So Illustrator 2024 can learn a thing or two. So it is now, during all this, it has now generated the outline. So it looks like we have some natural flower shapes. Potentially, it's kind of hard to tell from this mishmash right here. And now it's going in there and it's applying the colors. So we're not matching necessarily an active artboard style, and we're not lifting a style with an eyedropper. Instead, we're kind of defining the colors that we want to work with, and they're coming out like this. I'm actually watching them develop right here. And so let's say, well, that's pretty good. Actually, I like that one. And this one is what it is. All right, so let's say I want to apply this to all those faces. Now, what you can do is edit your pattern. And you can edit it directly from the swatches panel. And that's because we're working with traditional tile patterns. So what I'm going to do is deselect these faces just by pressing Control-Shift-A, Command-Shift-A on the Mac. And that way I can demonstrate that even though they're deselected, notice if I switch to a different swatch, it doesn't affect those faces because they're no longer selected. Anyway, I'm going to double click on this guy. What is it? Text to pattern 17. And so I'll double click on it in order to enter the pattern modification mode, whatever it's called. And sure enough, I've got right here, I've got this purple, right? And now notice if I kind of move it around a little bit, this is what I was talking about. Did I talk about this with punching? Not punch. The shapes aren't punching each other. They're not pugilists, but rather they are punching through each other. So it isn't like the flowers are sitting on this purplish background. Rather, they have punched through that purplish background. So all the shapes abut each other. So that means that you're not going to really move things around. You can try to get, if you know how to use this mode well, if you know how to work with patterns, then you can do all kinds of stuff in order to apply your modifications. But I'm just going to take this background and say, darn it, I want that shade of blue, that specific shade of blue that I asked for, and you didn't deliver to me. And now I'm going to try, let's say I click on one of these kind of pale yellow flowers to select it. Is that working? It doesn't seem like it's working at all. No, it did work. Good. And so I will make sure that all of the pale yellow stuff is selected by clicking on this icon up here in the horizontal control panel. Select similar colors is what it's going to be by default. And then I'm going to change it to that shade of orange I wanted right there. And let's see if I make a modification. I don't. No, I do not have the right thing selected. That is very frustrating. I will deselect that background, that rectangle in the background, by pressing Control-Shift-A. Command-Shift-A on the Mac is the keyboard shortcut for deselect right there. And now I will try once again to click on this shape right there. I did get it. And now I'll click on that select similar objects thing once again to select all of those flower shapes, all the yellowish ones, and I'll shift them to this shade of orange right here. And let's see if that works. And that I think that worked really well. In which case, if you're ready to commit your modifications, and notice, by the way, I just want you to see that we don't have the nested groups. You can see that over here in the layers panel. All right, so anyway, I'll click the done button. See that right there? And that will get you out of the pattern modification mode, and that will apply your changes as well. And it looks absolutely spectacular. And then if you want to combine that foreground right there with some kind of wonderful background, you want to color in the negative stuff as well, then just click. I've got a rectangle in the background right there that I've created in advance. And then I could just click on something like, actually, let's click on the original pattern right there, which would be this guy. And it's going to go ahead and reapply. Notice it creates a new pattern. So we edited the old one, we modified it. That is a little bit difficult to make out. It's sort of like we're engaging in some sort of camouflage. So I'll just take the opacity value up here in the control panel down to, let's say, 20%, and we get this lovely effect right here. And that is the final type that's available to you when using text to vector graphic here inside Illustrator 2024. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And don't forget, to learn how to wipe out all those AI variations in one fell swoop, join me at patreon.com/DeekNow. Then go to Deek.com and sign up for my newsletter, for heaven's sake. I'm Deke McClellan. This is Deek Now.